I think I'm sure I said yesterday, day before, that I was responding to what I guess you call a press inquiry. I haven't had one of those lately, and there's nothing to be said about it, except for the fact that if you put yourself out there, it happens. People ask you things. This is a guy, though, who was, a couple of years ago, wrote an interesting and interested write-up of the payphone radio thing. I didn't think about this in perspective, but it was just before quarantine, just before lockdown. It was February 2020. At which point, I don't think I saw any of that coming. I know some friends were talking about the new reality, but I took it seriously, but I was trying to have a sense of humor about it, and I gave up on that. That's not what I sat down to talk about, though. He sent me 20 questions, I think. I gave him way too much in return, but that's the nature of the beast. I'm an overshare. I only dipped into this a little bit, but since we were talking about the payphone radio thing, I didn't just mention, I wrote a whole paragraph about a period of 2 or 3 weeks, I think, when recordings from that radio were circulating on the dark web. It was being discussed among a bunch of people who seemed to think that this stuff was put out there by mistake, that it wasn't supposed to be public. And I think the key reason that they thought this was true, the key reason they thought they had found something that wasn't supposed to be out there, was that I had the very last call that I posted, the very last call that I made in I guess it was March. It could have even been April. I don't care anymore. But I wasn't calling from payphones anymore because of the contagion and the fact that lockdown didn't seem to do anything to slow the payphone apocalypse. Payphones were just disappearing with impunity. But the very last thing that I posted was a Skype call, and it was 15 minutes of me masturbating. This was not originally meant to be part of the payphone radio, but I thought that in the spirit of quarantine and lockdown and isolation, I thought it captured the zeitgeist of solitude, but it wasn't intended to be that originally. It was originally intended, it was something that I shared with a woman that I connected with, or we reconnected in March or April. We had corresponded some years earlier and just kind of drifted apart, I guess. She kept hearing that she knew I lived in Astoria, Queens, and she kept hearing that Queens was the epicenter of the epicenter, which was true, although that applied more to Elmhurst and I guess Corona and those contiguous area parts of Queens. But nevertheless, we reconnected and got into an incredibly passionate correspondence and telephone connection. It was one of the most mind-bending women I've ever had anything to do with. She left me shaking, and I don't exaggerate that for a second. She was absolutely incredible. And that's who I made that 15-minute call for. I didn't tell her that I made it public, and honestly I didn't think anything of it, because when I think of my radio streams, I think of just the ephemeral nature of it, the passing nature of it. I don't really expect people to record and then study and discuss this stuff. I mean, I know people do talk about it, but they don't, as far as I can tell, in these discussions that I've tuned into, and mostly I just give up paying attention to that stuff. But from what I've keyed into, people don't actually record this stuff. They just listen in, which is what you're supposed to do. I mean, that's the spirit of radio. So she never knew I made this public and that, but I don't think she would be offended or anything. There's another audio that I have that I intend to make public, but in a different way. It's the only phone sex encounter I've ever had that I recorded, and I didn't do this intentionally. I swear I was not aware this was being recorded. I had been recording calls, Skype calls, just as it automatically for so many years that I forgot it was even happening. And it's not like I record those calls in any kind of spirit of accumulation. I don't know why I do that, but because I never play those things back. But when I snapped out of the trance that I'd been in that call with her, I remembered that, oh right, and that this little icon, this little thing appeared on the computer screen to remind me that this call had been recorded. And I played it back, and it was one of the most beautiful things, one of the most beautiful things ever that any two people could have shared. But the thing with her, even if she knew I was talking about her right now, she wouldn't care. She didn't care or have any particular interest in anything outside of our conversations, outside of our encounters, outside of our little world that we created and that we cultivated in those months. It was never lost on either of us that a lot of our energies were fueled by the zeitgeist of the time, by the zeitgeist of quarantine and lockdown. And in her country, rules were really strict about isolation and distancing and just stay at home. They had military personnel out and about enforcing the rules about wearing a mask and having at least one backup mask on your person, and you had to have some legitimate reason to be out of your house. You had to be going somewhere, and she was accosted many times by such personnel. I forget why I got into this, but the rules in her country were strict. Not really strict here at all. I can't even imagine NYPD coming up to me. It's like, dude, mask up. But I got to thinking about her again, because in the course of this correspondence I had yesterday with the radio guy, memories of this woman kind of flooded my brain again. She's I don't wallow like in regret or anything, but she does start to feel like someone I let get away. But reality intrudes. I mean, this is why I went off on the strictness of the rules and of the quarantine rules in her country. Was the travel restrictions basically never let up for over a year. I think there was a brief window of time when I could have flown over there, but chances are, I remember thinking that even if I did that, or if I did that, I'd probably end up getting trapped because the rules were probably going to be reinforced while I was there, and I'd be unable to get out. And that's exactly what happened. The rules went back to very, very strict within a couple of weeks. And for what it's worth, I'm not the kind of guy who's going to fly all halfway around the world just to consummate a relationship with a woman. There were signals that, I mean, I already said something about the zeitgeist of the time, but there were plenty of signals to me, loud and clear actually, that we wouldn't really get along well in person. We wouldn't get along well outside of this very explodable bubble that we created. And yet, our last conversation, our last correspondence, I didn't answer this question, and maybe I should have. I know I should have. I can't answer it now because it just it would be selfish of me to barge into her life again. Just to give her an answer to a question she asked probably about 18 months ago. Has it been that long? But she asked me if that love was real. She wanted to know if what we had was real, if that was real love. All I can say is yes. God, yes. But I'm a bastard for never giving her a straight answer to that question.